Welcome to Healing America with Dr. Jim White. Jim has been investing, coaching executives, and turning around companies for over 30 years. Now your host, Dr. Jim White.
And welcome to Healing America. Excuse me as I get started. That's a good way to start the show this evening. So welcome. It is November the 10th, 2020. Big day tomorrow. Veterans Day. And we have a special guest that is a great patriot. And I don't know how we timed it, but I do know how we timed it. We got a great staff, and Scott made this come together, and so did Debbie. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest that's going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour. And then after we do some introductions here, I am going to spend some time with you and talking about building trust. I think it's an appropriate topic at this point in time. So our guest this evening is Ron Winter. And Ron is the author of 4 books, including the just released Victory Betrayed, Operation Dewey Canyon, U.S. Marines in Vietnam, a nonfiction account of the last major and extraordinary successful Marine battle of the Vietnam War. He has also written a novel, The Hypocrite, a celestial murder mystery, the nonfiction Masters of the Art of Fighting Marines memoir in Vietnam, published by Random House, and Granny Snatching, how a 92-year-old widow fought the courts and her family to win her freedom. Ron joined the Marine Corps in January 1966, serving 4 years on active duty, including a 13-month tour in Vietnam as a helicopter crewman and avionics technician. While in Vietnam, Ron flew more than 300 missions as an aerial gunner and was awarded, listen to this, 15 air medals and combat air crew wings with 3 stars, in addition to the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry and numerous other decorations. After completing his enlistment, Ron returned to college, earning an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering and English literature. He then spent nearly 20 years as a print journalist, including stints as reporter, investigative reporter, supervising editor, and columnist, earning numerous awards for his investigative work. He has worked as an adjunct professor of communications and public speaking, runs an event management business with his wife, specializing in military reunions. He is a certified personal trainer and an amateur competitive powerlifter. He works as a media relations specialist for public relations, advertising, and marketing firms. Like I said, Ron will be joining us at the bottom of the hour, but I wanted to go ahead and give you his great bio so you can have an opportunity if you go in and check out his books. And if you haven't ordered those books, go ahead and do so now. So you got a few minutes before we invite Ron on. I am so looking forward to having a discussion with Ron this evening. He, like I said, joined the Marines in January 1966. He was a couple of years before me, but we were in country at the same time in 1969 when this event occurred. And I can't wait to hear more about the book, and we'll be drilling into that momentarily. So, geez, it continues, right? It continues. The presidential election. We continue to get the results, and I don't know about you, but I sure will be glad when all the results are in and we exhaust everything and all of the rhetoric that's going on. So what I thought we would do this evening was talk about building trust. That is a subject close to my heart. Had a friend of mine, Stephen M.R. Covey, and wrote the book, The Speed of Trust, and he and his partner, Greg Link have done some wonderful work, and Stephen M. Arwis, the son of Stephen Covey, 7 Habits, right? So, great book, still great today. So, building trust in the workplace. So, I am going to include the U.S. government, how's that, in the definition of the workplace for our discussion this evening. I'm going to include the U.S. government. I'm going to include every politician at every level, from PTA all the way to the White House and beyond, and globally, around the globe, in this building trust in the workplace. Now, there's a law in ancient Rome that required the engineer, and I want you to get this, the engineer who built an arch to be the first to stand beneath it. I want to repeat that. The law in ancient Rome required the engineer who built an ark to be the first to stand beneath it. Perhaps if the impact of our actions were as publicly visible, we wouldn't be facing diminishing trust, and that's the word I chose to use, diminishing trust levels in most of our workplaces, and especially in our government body today. The unspoken toe of trust deficit impacts productivity, engagement, creativity, discretionary efforts, and economic recovery. And while none of us can change the trust trajectory of others, we can't. We can certainly change our own. We can change our own. Sometimes we make mistakes. I make them all the time. Sometimes things don't work the way we expect them to work. Sometimes matters happen outside of our control and cause commitments not to be honored. Is it disappointments? Yes. Are they diminished trust? Maybe, if it reoccurs over and over and over. Now, according to research findings at Wharton, this is through Wharton School, trust harmed by untrusty behavior can be effectively restored when individuals observe a consistent series of trustworthy acts. Now, for you that follow me very closely, you know, sometimes I say things and I go back and repeat it, and this is one of the times I'm going to go ahead and repeat it. According to research findings at Wharton, trust harmed by untrusty behaviors can be effectively restored when individuals observe a consistent series of trustworthy actions. Now, however, that's that word, one of my favorite transitions, right? However, consistent, trustworthy actions aren't always enough for trust restoration. What happens if we never plan to honor that commitment to begin with? What then? What do we do? Of all of the behaviors negatively affecting trust building in the workplace, and remember at the beginning, I said I was going to include the U.S. government in this definition of the workplace this evening. So all of the negative behaviors affecting trust building in the workplace, lying tops the list of what people say when they think of trust betrayed. Well, we had plenty of that. It continues today. And we have a divided country, and we must start rebuilding the trust. We must start rebuilding the trust. Now, according to the study at Wharton, it turns out that trust harmed by the same untrusty actions and deception never fully recovers. Even when the deceived participants receive a promise and an apology and observe a constant series of trustworthy actions, even when those things occur. But Most people aren't involved in deliberate deceptions at work. Or at least I like to believe that. For most of us, the good news is that authentic, and I use the word authentic trust, the kind that we need in our workplace, the kind that we need at all levels of government, the kinds that we need with our friends, the kind that we need with our spouses, our family, develops through critical thought and experience. Critical thought and experience with accountability. That seems to be missing in Washington today. Accountability at its core, and can be regained. It can be regained. That's the opportunity that we have as American citizens. That's an opportunity that we have as leaders of industry. That's an opportunity we have as leaders of families. That's an opportunity, accountability at its core. It can be regained. Relationships matter more than outcomes to those who practice authentic trust. Relationships matter more than outcomes. Kind of a balance. Got to have the outcome. You got to become accountable and do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. You cannot continue to fall short of those commitments and expect trust to remain. You must build a reservoir of trust that you can get back on if you make a mistake. And believe me, I make mistakes daily. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to share 5 tips. 5 tips. I said, as I was thinking about the show today, and I was reading Ron's great resume, and as I was reflecting back on that time and Vietnam myself, I could not help but think of trust. Had to trust your, I'm going to use the word, your fellow soldier, left, right, front, rear, flank. Had to trust each other. And part of that trust, once you gain it, it's such a beautiful thing. And when you lose it, it's devastating. It's devastating. And that's where I think we are today. Trust in our leaders of government and industry. Trust when we say COVID-19 is a serious issue. Trust when we say to our employees, we must take COVID-19, the precautions, seriously. We know it's difficult to wear the mask and do the social distancing and doing all those things. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've been in my office for months. Some days I feel like I'm in prison, right? But at the same time, we have got to trust in our system, got to trust in our new leaders, and we got to trust that our existing leader will finally say, how can I help the country to get back on the right path? Doubt that's going to happen, but I certainly can hope. Trust. Trust is everything, ladies and gentlemen. So, the 5 things that I decided to share as I wrote them down on my pad this evening. The first thing I decided to share is number 1. And I said, be like the Roman engineer. Whatever your work is associated and its associated actions, operate as you must publicly stand for the results. Trust can't be restored without personal accountability and grounded in consistent and trustworthy actions. It cannot. That includes acknowledging that trust was broken when it occurs. First and foremost, we all know this, but we got to acknowledge it. We've got to own it. We have to try to do better. It distresses me when I see half of our country, 70 million people, and I'm going to stop here and say, man, the turnout for the presidential election it's just astounding. But what disturbs me to a degree is how divided we are, because we don't trust each other. We don't trust each other. And hopefully we can start that healing. And that's what our program is all about. Healing America. Okay? Healing America. Now, the next thing, number 2, I say, own your role in what happened. We said we all make mistakes. We all hurt people unintentionally. And more often, the people we hurt the most are the people we love. We all hurt people unintentionally. We all impact relationships from time to time by our actions and our inactions. At work, at home. But the difference in created openness for trust to be restored is the difference between seeing yourself as a passenger along for the ride or the responsible driver, culpable for the missteps, the misturns. Own what's yours. Own it. Own what's yours. Number 3, I decided to include this evening. Operate with the inner mirror. Operate with the inner mirror. Watch yourself, be yourself. A lot of you have heard me share a practice that I've used when going to the mirror and looking into the mirror, into your eyes, into the soul of your human, your DNA. Watch yourself, be yourself. Are you operating from good intentions or manipulative self-interest? Are you honoring your commitments and fulfilling your promises? Would you trust you? Would you trust you? The power of behavioral integrity, the alignment of actions and words can't be overstated. Words matter. And sometimes they're worse than any weapon. Words can be a weapon. How will people perceive your actions from this point on? Don't give anyone any reason to doubt your trustworthiness or your intentions. Number 4, then I lay out. Restart the trust. Trust is an action. Someone must restart the trust. Who is going to restart the trust in America? Who is that? The president-elect is attempting to do that. Will you agree with everything that he stands for or not? But one thing that he is trying, and he will continue. At all account, I don't know him personally. All account, he's a decent man. But I've certainly followed him for the past 40 some odd years. Like I said, don't agree with every policy, but I can trust him. I believe that. I can trust him. So, number 4, restart the trust. As I said, trust is an action. Someone must restart the trust. Be that someone. Be that someone that starts the trust. In all the companies I have the pleasure to lead, it's all about trust and the lack of. And some of our hiccups goes directly to that lack of trust. Just like you don't get love by being lovable, right? You don't get love by just being lovable. but only by loving. You don't get trust unless you give trust. And that's where it gets a little dicey for me sometimes. You can have so many actions over the years that continue where you build up this trust deficit. And I'm an optimist. I do everything I possibly can to give people opportunity. But if you consistently receive failed promises and actions, that erodes the trust. I wonder about the people in middle America that has such disdain and lack of trust for our political systems. But use the dimmer switch approach to trust building, fueled by authentic communication practices. And give it time. We need time to heal the divide in America. We need time. But you got to take action every day to gain just a little bit more trust than you had when you started the beginning of the day. Diminished trust or broken trust, it takes time to regain what was. And when I come in, we're coach breaching that, it's devastating. If the relationship matters, then trust building matters as well. I think the relationships matter. I think they matter. Our neighbors, our co-workers, our spouse, our siblings. It matters. So be patient. Be patient as we start this rebuilding process. Trying times are not the times to stop trying. And I forget who said that. I think it was a musician. I've loved it, kept it for years. As I'm preparing for each one of my sessions, our webcasts, I'm going to old notes and coming up with different things. And I'm always saying, what can we do today that is current that will maybe make a difference? I said, we all have stories we can share about broken trust at work, relationships. But in the reality of these times, it's time to start sharing stories of trust rebuilt. It's time to start sharing the trust rebuilt. We not only need to rebuild trust in business, we need to do the same in every community in America. If we are start healing America, we need to do the same. In every community, we need to do the same, right? And before we go to a brief break, and I hope this will resonate with you, have this email here, and I'm going to read it with no names from it. I want to read it, and I hope after I completed reading it, with the trust and the theme in mind. And then when we get ready to have a wonderful conversation with Ronald Winter. And this email was sent to me this afternoon, and it says, please relay this message to Jim White. And it goes, I caught your wise words on a podcast, and after hearing your down-to-earth, roll-up sleeve story, I was impressed and inspired. I have been toiling on a startup for a business for a few years, pivoting, adjusting, changing, and then just when we started to get some footing in the market, the pandemic hit. I'm resolute, and I want to continue fighting every day, but I'm feeling really disenfranchised. Is there any advice you have for someone who feels alone, beaten down, and exhausted before reaching the finish line. Thank you for sharing your story. I hope to share my story with others and help them one day once I get to the top of the mountain. Thank you. I wanted to share that story today for hope. And each and every Tuesday when we decide to do a webcast, I don't know how it's going to resonate, but I do know I do it for one reason. If there's one word or one thing that we can say to help another human being, then it's been well worth it. So this individual that went out of his way to share his story, trust. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. So I intend to reach out to this person, learn more, and see what we can do, right? Run more and see what we can do. So what I want to do now, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We're a few minutes early, but you that follow me, you know when I'm through, we're through. And I wanted to share that piece on trust with you this evening. So what we'll do, we'll go ahead and take a quick break, get this in, and we will come back and we'll have a most enjoyable conversation with Ronald Winter. So let's just go to break. We'll be right back.
Welcome to PHT Opportunity Fund, a vehicle for you to make strategic ag tech investments in distressed communities called Opportunity Zones. These communities struggle with poverty, unemployment, failing infrastructure, and more. Right now, there are over 30 million people living in thousands of urban and rural opportunity zones from coast to coast. PHT Opportunity Fund targets the most promising investment possibilities in each of these zones for investors like you. Right now, we're redeveloping a 28-acre campus in sunny Salinas, California, the salad bowl of the world. When completed, the Salinas campus will be a cutting-edge pre-cooling and cold storage facility serving growers of the entire region. Cold storage is a tailwind asset class secured by essential need. Through PHT Opportunity Fund, you can reduce taxes on capital gains by up to 10%, and if you hold your investment in the fund for 10 years, any additional gain is tax-free. We deliver predictable, sustainable, long-term value for investors and stakeholders. Earn above-average returns while breathing new life into low-income communities and making a positive social impact. Visit PHTOpportunityFund.com.
Good evening, Ron. How are you?
I'm terrific. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm doing fantastic.
There we go.
What a background you have, my friend. And first, I'm going to say thank you for your service.
Well, same to you. And you're welcome.
You're welcome. Tomorrow, Veterans Day. Been thinking about that all day. If you don't mind, let's just start off there. What's that mean to you?
A lot of things, actually, but it's one time when I'm not really a big fan of people putting it all into one day. Let's put it that way. I guess I'd rather it was 365 days. But I learned after Vietnam, take what you can get. So it's nice. It's very nice. Last year, before the COVID came out and everything, my wife took me out to a restaurant and they had reduced price or get one, buy one, get one free. I had this great steak for lunch and there were probably 300 veterans there. And I felt like it was back at Camp Lejeune, you know. And I like that. I like that. You know, it's nice. I don't need it every day personally, you know, but I like that there is recognition.
Likewise, absolutely agree with that. Well, I tell you, you got a new book.
I do.
You got a new book, Victory Betrayed. Tell us about it.
Okay. Originally, I was asked by the United States Marine Corps Heritage Foundation to do a book on Operation Dewey Canyon, which occurred from January to March 1969 up in I-Corps, almost up to the DMZ, right along the Laotian border. We had identified that area as becoming the main infiltration route off the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Fortunate that that operation was commanded by a general named Raymond Davis, who was a Medal of Honor recipient at the Chosin Reservoir in World War II. And he had come to Vietnam at the same time I came, which was with my entire unit, HMM 161, which stands for Helicopters Marine Medium, CH-46s. A lot of people mistake them for Chinooks. The Chinook is the Army version, much bigger, but they look very similar. So anyway, he got there at the same time we did at Quang Tri, and he took apart everything that had been going on in the previous year with the McNamara Wall and all that nonsense. Took all the Marine battalions out of the fixed positions like Yolin and not so much Quezon, that was getting over, but all those fixed positions that they had that were part of what they called Leatherneck Square, and put everybody out in the field and went on the assault, became aggressive. And I've always felt, when I look back at it and learned a lot more, that probably saved a lot of our lives because it did not keep people sitting there under this constant artillery fire. Anyway, he had identified this as where their main infiltration was going to be and where they were going to go to go in and do the spring offensives in 1969 against the coastal cities. And he put together this operation with the 9th Marines, all 3 battalions of the 9th Marine Regiment, 2nd Battalion, 12th Marines Artillery. All this air power that we had going was, at the time, it was the only Marine operation in Vietnam at that time, up until that time, that was 100% supported by helicopters. There were no roads that anyone could get into that area that were usable. There were no navigable rivers. There were rivers there, but you couldn't get boats up them at that point. So it was 100% helicopter supported. And it's been written a lot about, and what they asked me to do was to do an update for the 50th anniversary of that battle. And they said, I want you to use 60% previously published material and 40% new material. And most of the previously published material had come through the Marine Corps History Division, which is down in Quantico. So fortunately, I had been there, and both of the units I served in, 161 and 164, both supported Dewey Canyon. I was very familiar with the area. My big Dewey Canyon story actually is funny. as you would know from your own experiences, things that you just have to laugh at sometimes. There's a lot of heroism, some god-awful battles. It was a tough operation, but my personal experience was ferrying a group of people from one fire base to another fire base, and in the meantime, going over the top of a third one, and down below us, they were wrapping detonation cord around the trees to blow them down, right. But they didn't tell us that. So we're at maybe 400 feet because there was always a low ceiling, and I'm on the port gun, and I'm just looking down, and I'm seeing all this activity. I was like, boom! This god-awful explosion, and I jumped up and hit my helmet on the overhead. And there was a major in the seat next to me, and he just starts laughing at me. I said, well, I'm glad I'm giving you a good ride, buddy. And he just called me, comes out, very, very loud in there. So he told me, they're using det cord to blow down the trees. I said, boy, I would have liked a heads up on that one. So that's my personal big Dewey Canyon story. But what happened was I knew air crews that had flown in there, a lot of them. And we do reunions, and we were set for a reunion right in May of that year, 2014, over in Memphis. So I just put out the message, hey, if you guys flew on Dewey Canyon and you have memories or things, we'll get together on Saturday afternoon. I had this crowd of guys, and I just started doing interviews, just the same as back in my journalism days. I met people who referred me, and I started getting the artillery guys. I started getting the grunts. And what I really wanted, I reviewed all the stuff that had been done previous, not all of it, but of course a lot of it, most of the official stuff from the History Division. And the one thing that was common was that it was written from the standpoint of the upper echelons. Company A moved over here while Company B did this, and Delta Company did that, and Hotel Company did that. And I said, no, I want to know what the grunts were feeling. I want to know what the guy who was moving from here to here was feeling? What was he doing? What was it like? How about the cannon cockers? How about those guys muscling all those artillery shells? They fired over 130,000 rounds of artillery in that operation because somebody had to lift all that stuff, and it's heavy. I wanted to know that. I was getting all the stuff from our air crews, and that's what I did. And I really ended up with actually 60% new material and 40% of the previously published stuff, and it put together as a very nice book. But what happened was, the history division, it was supposed to print it in time for the anniversary, just really started dragging its feet. And a whole year went by, and virtually nothing was done. I was contacting them. Yep, it's still here. What happened was they changed personnel in the history division. The new guy had no regard whatsoever for Vietnam, the battles we fought, the people who were there, whatever, and he canceled the whole project. And there were some really well-written and very good historical books in the previous. It started with the buildup. It went through the landings. It went through the early days fighting against the Viet Cong, the Tet Offensive. They did have Bay City and they did have Khe Sanh. And Dewey Canyon was supposed to be next. And then there were others after. And we never got it. He just, boom, canceled the whole project. Said, done. That's it. So I'm looking at now at like 4 years worth of work is just going right out the window. And I was talking to my son, who is an avid reader. I am so happy about it. He loves to read. And he said, Dad, this is an opportunity for you. One door opens and another one closes. He said, you've been wanting to put all this stuff together for a long time. And I had learned some things over the years. I have a friend here in Connecticut who was in Vietnam for 2 tours as an Army intelligence enlisted man. He left there and joined the CIA and went back for 2 more tours. And it so happens I was on a trip with him in state. We went to a function together. And on the way back, for some reason or another, I brought up something about Indonesia and the way the Russians had tried to turn Indonesia. And my actual knowledge of it was all wrong. I was just talking about what I'd heard. Well, because he was in the CIA, he knew what actually happened. And he told me that the CIA had engineered a coup in 1965 that didn't quite work, but that Prime Minister Sukarno, who was very, very cozy and friendly with the communists, eventually was squeezed out by General Suharto, who was vehemently anti-communist, as was most of the country. But Sukarno had about 1/3 of his support from communism. And Indonesia being a Muslim country, most of the people didn't like that. So they ousted Sukarno, brought in Suharto. And the reason why this was important was because at that time, post-World War II, on a world view, there were 3 major places that the communists were trying to take control of to squeeze out capitalism. The Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, and the Straits of Malacca, which run right between Singapore and Indonesia. And that was where they were going at that time with the big communist buildup. So for the next 3 years, from 66 to 69, Suharto had a massive military campaign against the communists. And it was very successful. And it was parallel to what we were doing in Vietnam. And more I stopped and looked and got familiar with what was happening. It almost appeared like Vietnam was a diversion to keep the major communist armies bottled up there, the Chinese, the Russians, and the North Vietnamese, while the real prize was the Straits of Malacca. And interestingly, in 1969, when they basically had won the war against the communists in Indonesia and Malaysia, they were fighting on both sides. Richard Nixon gets elected with this big secret plan to end the Vietnam War. And he comes in and is inaugurated literally on the days that Dewey Canyon launched. Well, 2 months later, we had this tremendous operation, hard fought. And I put a lot of that in the book, including a week where the 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines went across the border into Laos and took over the Ho Chi Minh Trail and kicked the living daylights out of the communists over there. And the amount of war material that they captured, they had mountains there. that were completely hollowed out, drilled out tunnels in them. I mean, rock mountains, not dirt, and massive facilities in there, barracks and hospitals and repair shops. You couldn't see them. And I flew over there, I don't know how many times, but a lot. In that triple canopy jungle, you couldn't see anything there.
Right.
And they got them, they overran them, hard fought battles. Not any of this was easy. When they got over, by the time they got to the Laotian border in 29 went over there, the communists were in disarray. And one of the guys that gave me a lot of information and pictures, which was great, because he's one of the very few people. He was the artillery observer. He was attached to 29. He went over. He had a camera and he took pictures. And he gave me some great pictures for the book, but also really great insight. And he said, Ron, when we were done on that side of the border, it was a rout. He said they were heading out for Hanoi as fast as they could go. And when they came back over the border into Vietnam, which one of the things I thought was really funny about this was the guys on the Vietnam side, one of the artillery units, sent a kid down to the trail where they were coming over with a big cardboard sign, "Welcome to Vietnam." So they had this phenomenal victory, and they believe like Jay Standish, the guy I was talking about, told me. He said, Ron, we came across that border, we thought we had changed the course of the war. And for a very short time they had. And then out of nowhere, and there's one other little factor here. Directly west of Khe Sanh, in Laos, there's a town called Chapone. And it's spelled either Xepon or Tchepone, depending on whose spelling it is. But anyway, that was a choke point on the Ho Chi Minh Trail for all the North Vietnamese supplies, men, material, everything. That was the place. And they all knew that if we went over and took that, and Westmoreland was saying this 2 years earlier when Johnson was president, you go over there and take Chapone, and this war is over. And after the war, and I've got it in the book, North Vietnamese generals who were in charge of running the Ho Chi Minh Trail said, yeah, if you'd gone over there and shut us down, 3 months tops, the war would have been over. And instead of doing that, Richard Nixon comes on the scene, and what's his big secret to end the war? We'll just leave. And he pulls everybody out, starts the troop withdrawals. 9th Marines were out of there about 4 months later. And what I did after that, so I took all this, and that's the core of your book, because it was still supposed to be about these guys and these battles. Mm-hmm. At the end of it, I put in an epilogue, and guys have been contacting me now. The book has been out since the summer. And I'm just so grateful, because these guys are saying nobody ever knew step by step how it was that Vietnam got lost. So I put in about when what they call Dui Canyon 2, when the South Vietnamese went across and tried to take Chapone. And it's also called Lam Sang 719. Now that actually was the South Vietnamese name for that operation. Dui Canyon 2 was Army guys that were up on the Khe Sanh Plateau, thousands of them. And they were using that as a diversion in their own right for the North Vietnamese to think they were going back into the A Shau Valley. But what they really wanted to do was go to Chapone. What happened was our guys weren't allowed to go over because Congress had passed the Cooper-Church Amendment that forbid them from doing it. That was after Nixon sent troops over into Cambodia previous year. So our guys were forced to stand on the Khe Sanh side and watch. They sent about 12,000 South Vietnamese troops over there, but the North Vietnamese figured out what was happening, and they counterattacked with 60,000 people. So they were there about 6 weeks trying to get it. It didn't work. They had to come back. But the next year, North Vietnam figured, aha, we've got it. You know, the Americans didn't help out the South on this. So that's when they had the Easter invasion in 1972. 250,000 troops, armor, artillery, the whole thing. But this time, because they came into South Vietnam, Americans were allowed to help. It was a mostly South Vietnamese battle at that time, but they did allow us to use our air power. What I found out, and this once again from CIA sources, but the North lost between 75 and 150,000 troops out of the 250,000 that they sent down, plus half of all their armor and artillery, and the invasion failed. And at that point, we were in a terrific position to actually, they were ready to surrender. I mean, if we had done certain things, and there was a couple times there, but they didn't. It went through the Christmas bombings. It went through the Paris Peace Accords in '73. And right after the Paris Peace Accords were signed and the POWs came home, the Congress passed the Case Church Amendment. Got to keep these straight. That was in June of '73, and it basically negated the Paris Peace Accords. It denied assistance to the South Vietnamese. It denied one of the main points that Nixon had in the negotiations was that he was going to ensure that America was going to be there to keep them supplied and assisted militarily. Between that time and the fall of '74, Nixon gets bounced out of office. They passed the Foreign Assistance Act of 1974, which eliminated all aid and assistance to South Vietnam. North Vietnam sees it, starts making little overtures little by little. Nobody does anything about it. Come the spring, it was a full-fledged invasion. By May, it was all over and all gone. And people, including, very interestingly, spouses of friends of mine that I served with, said they never knew how all this came about because it really wasn't covered very much here. It was all like, oh yes, South Vietnam, the heck with them, their governments, they're all a bunch of corrupt people, blah, blah, blah. Well, that I didn't see it that way, and I still don't see it that way. And it ended up with, after it fell, South Vietnam went down, and then Cambodia went down, Laos went down, and they went on a rampage. 3 million people roughly were slaughtered over there in that time. You had 2 million people as the boat people. It was horrible, and it was caused because of what our government was doing. And if you recall that time back then, that's when they blamed it on us and said we didn't do our jobs and we weren't as good as the previous generation and we were walking time bombs. Remember that? Oh yeah, we were all going to just go crazy out here. And so that's the book. That's what's in it. I mean, and that came from being told, forget your project you just worked 4 years on. We're not going to help you.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about, and you answered my question before I asked. I was going to ask about the history division, what happened there. So you've answered that. Let's go back, Ron, because you were in country. Well, I was in country 68, 69, 70. I was there, and the media. Did we get covered properly?
No. One of the things I bring out in the book, they wanted body counts. It always had to be a body count. And as I pointed out here, there were a number of the battles that were part of the overall Dewey Canyon battle, where B-52s were brought in, heavy artillery. So they had the 105s, they had 106s actually, and they had the 155s. And that's a big piece of artillery. That's and they kept this whole thing. We lost 120 Marines, 130 Marines out of that regiment. Yeah. The communists lost 1,600 by intact body count. And as they point out, there was one battle where they tried to overrun the main fire base on Tet of '69, and they fired beehive rounds at them. Well, you understand beehive rounds and what that does. And one of the guys, actually, he's still alive. He's a Medal of Honor recipient, and he told me, he says, "Ron, there were body parts all over the place, but you couldn't count them because the media said, well, if you don't have a body," and they didn't understand or they didn't care that when a B-52 bomber drops a 500-pound bomb from 30,000 feet in the air, everything in that blast radius is vaporized. It's not left to count. But if you know, because of your intelligence reports, that you had 5,000 enemy soldiers coming in your position and they walked into a pre-planned grid and that whole grid was bombed, well, you pretty much know that you've killed 5,000 soldiers because there's nobody going to get out of it. So I honestly felt that, and I was in the media from 75, 76 onwards, and I had some things said to me and about me in the media that were just stupid and nasty, downright nasty. Yeah. They had no concept of it. Yeah. And they didn't even understand, well, where were the bodies? Well, the bodies are gone. That's where the bodies are. Yeah. And I think that's the best example of it. And I've seen, I did leave some parts of the book. I put some things in about things that were reported, things that were said, and they were just plain wrong. just plain wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, we got about 9 minutes left in this segment. What lessons, Ron, do you think we Americans have learned from Vietnam? Can you think?
Sometimes I'm not sure we've learned any lessons from Vietnam. But one of the things, and this goes to your book, I honestly believe we have unprecedented abilities to communicate and travel that we didn't even have back then. They've become so much better, so instantaneous. One of the things I always felt about Vietnam, I was very fortunate in that I got to know some Vietnamese people while I was there, and I liked them immensely. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them are dead. And I don't think, I think when people can vote in a capital 10,000, 12,000 miles away and say, oh yeah, forget them, the government's corrupt or whatever. That always kind of cracked me up, the U.S. Congress calling somebody else corrupt. But anyway, if you knew those people, you wouldn't feel that way. They're human beings. I heard some really stupid things said over those years back then, and I don't mean to be so critical about it, but I think it actually deserves it. But I heard people say, well, Asian women don't care about they don't care about death. They don't see. No. I saw Vietnamese women crying for their children and their husbands and all, the same as any American would. We all feel the same way. And if there's one thing we should be using this newfound ability for transportation and communication is to get to know each other. Because once you start knowing people, then you got skin in the game. Then you don't want to just drop a bomb or send over a drone because there's somebody there that you know. And that's the way I felt about it when they just let it all go. It's like when I was watching the news of the South Vietnamese army falling back and the North Vietnamese coming down and they hit Da Nang, I said, I know people there, It's sickening.
Right. No, I understand. I absolutely agree with you. When I asked the question about what have we learned, we're pushing over 50 years now, a little longer. And sometimes I look at it, I don't think we learned a darn thing. I really don't think we learned anything. And I also like what you say about we got to get to know people. We got to learn how to talk to people. We got to understand that this is a big globe. Everybody gets up for the most part, and they care about quality of life of some nature. And I had the same experience that you did. I became very fond of a lot of the out in the villages, a lot of the Vietnamese out. And a lot of them gave me food when I didn't have food.
Yeah. They were very gracious people, and unfortunately, we were fighting against a really brutal enemy.
Yeah, and so what's some of the next projects? I'd love your work. I haven't bought the book yet, but I am going to be buying the book, and I'm going to give you an opportunity right now before I forget it. Where can we go get the book? Just tell everybody where can we get that book.
RonaldWinterBooks.com. It's on the screen there. Okay. Or you can get it on Amazon, all the usual outlet places. You can get it there.
Yeah. What's next?
Back years ago, I did my first and at this point only novel, which was called The Hypocrite. I retitled it a Celestial Murder Mystery, which I had so much fun writing. So right now, I just want to market Victory Betrayed. And I'm making this one. I wish I could get out and talk to people. I love doing that, and I haven't been able to because of the whole COVID thing. That was actually part of my marketing plan, was to be traveling and talking to groups. And I just want people to understand, that, yeah, there was victory right at our hands, and it was taken out of our hands and put into politics, and we had no say about it. So that's why I titled it Victory Betrayed. By the way, when I was still under the umbrella of the history division, they told me I could not use the word victory anywhere in this book. So when they just canceled the project, I just went back and put victory wherever I could. I'm not going to let our Marines be told that they didn't win a victory when they know darn well they did.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you where the title came from. I think you just told me, right?
Yep, that was it. And it was the political machinations that went on from 1970 onwards, and I want people to know that. But next project, I want to do another novel that's going to be a sequel to The Hypocrite.
Mm.
And you might enjoy this when it's all done because it's going to be centered in the media. So
Ooh.
I mean, same characters, a lot of same characters, but they're going to move on from where they were at the end of The Hypocrite.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, before I have one disagreement with you on your book.
Sure. Everybody does. Go ahead.
Okay. You really like The City of New Orleans as one of your top 10 American musicals, and I love it too. But I really like Arlo Guthrie better than Willie Nelson on that particular one.
Okay. I'm gonna add, we're doing an insert on that. I like that one too.
But I do like a lot of Willie Nelson. I'm not putting him down. It's just that one song.
No.
I mean, when Willie does this is the last cowboy song. I love that. You know, in Poncho and Lefty, I love that. Those are great Willie songs. City of New Orleans, I'm an Arlo Guthrie guy on that one.
Good. Hey, I just think, well, man, that was easy. A lot of people say, yeah, I disagree with you about a lot of things, and you never had that before as an author, right? So that was an easy one. So I like that. Hey, you know, I was just thinking about the book. I love the story. I'm going to get the book. I want everybody to get, but Marines Memorial in San Francisco. It's a hotel. They have a speaking series, and I need to hook you up. And they're doing it virtually right now. It's a big deal.
I'd love to do that. Absolutely, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to make a note. I know Scott doesn't let anything pass, but I want to make some connections there because they have pre-COVID that have these stories, and it's you go into Marines Memorial. It's a hotel. And
yeah, I have heard of it. Yeah,
you've heard of it, right? So you know what it is. So they have this beautiful speaking tour. So they're actually doing it now. And I love the way you tell the story. You're a great storyteller. I cannot wait to get the book and read it. And my friend, sometimes I never have enough time because I had so many other questions. But thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service. And 300 mission as an aerial gunner.
Yes. Now I'll tell you something about that.
Please.
In my outfit 161, I only flew part-time. I was an avionics technician. So I spent 15 days a month working on the aircraft, 15 days a month flying in. Part of that time was flying gunner, and part of time was flying in left seat on test flights.
Uh-huh.
And the guys that flew full-time, in fact, I just talked to him, one of my buddies yesterday, who spent 50 years out in San Francisco and never talked about our time together until 4 years ago at one of our reunions. Now, he flew 1,000 missions as a crew chief. A buddy of mine here, a late friend of mine, lived here in Connecticut. In fact, I bought land from his mom, built my house on it. He flew 1,050 missions. There's a pilot I heard from today, because we're all emailing each other, happy birthday stuff, you know. But yeah, he flew 1,000 missions. And there's a lot of guys I know that were very close to that mark. Very close. Now, I'll tell you something else. I flew 300 missions and walked away without a scratch. But more than that, I never lost a pilot, a co-pilot, a crew chief, other gunner, corpsman, or passenger in that 300 missions.
Wow.
Never. Not one person.
Well, as you well know, the stats back in 68, 69 was
We're not in our favor.
not in our favor. It wasn't in our favor. But I tell you what, without going on the Army side, without our Hueys, they were our best friends. Let me tell you. What's that?
I still, we have an Air National Guard not too far away at Bradley Airport, and Hueys come over sometimes. Well, the big one is the Chinooks come over,
Sure.
And I can feel them. I'm like radar and MASH. I can feel them when they're still 5 miles away, and I always go outside. I have to.
You're a pleasure, sir. Thank you again for your service. Thank you for what you do. And I'm going to get the book, and I'll make sure that we will make an introduction in San Francisco, at least this story needs to be told. Anything we can do to support it, we will. Okay.
Jim, I'm very grateful for the time and for meeting you, and I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you too. Have a good evening. So next week, we're going to continue our discussion, and I'm so grateful for Ron. I tell you, there's so many, as I was listening to him, just brought back so many memories. So I'm grateful for Ron. Thank you for what you've done. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending some time with us this evening. Until next Tuesday, have a good week.
Thank you for your participation and interest in Healing America with Dr. Jim White. To stay in touch with Jim, go to www.healingamericawithdrjimwhite.com.